we will begin with prayers. Okay, so these are prayers that we usually say at the beginning of teachings and other activities related to Dharma. They help us get into a positive state of mind. And those of you who've been following the Discovering Buddhism program, I think the previous module, module 8, was about daily practice. So you probably learned about these prayers. If you're not comfortable reciting the prayers, that's completely fine. You can just meditate. But those who would like to, we'll recite these prayers together, starting with refuge and bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. The 7 Limb Prayer contains 7 different practices for purifying negative energy and increasing positive energy, or merit, creating merit, good karma. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. The mandala offering involves thinking of all the beautiful, pleasing, precious things in the universe, collecting them all together, transforming them into a pure land, offering it to the Buddha, to the objects of refuge, and making the wish that all living beings will be able to experience the Pure Land. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this Pure Land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. And then let's recite the mantra of the Buddha 3 times. And you can imagine Buddha's blessings, energy, positive energy, coming into you, into your heart, into your mind, helping to transform your mind, make it more peaceful and positive and less confused and diluted, and help to inspire you to learn and practice the Buddha's teachings as much as possible. Chayata Mahamunaye Soha Tayata Om Mune Mune Mahamunaye Soha. Okay, so just sit quietly for a few minutes and try to make sure your mind really is here and now and not thinking about other things like your work, what you were doing during the day, and so on, or what you're going to do later tonight or tomorrow. So leave aside other thoughts of other times and places and just let your mind be in the present, right here, right now. And also do your best to have as your reason, your motivation for being here or joining this class, the wish to be of benefit to others, to the world as much as possible, to bring more wisdom, compassion, joy, other positive qualities, positive attitudes, and to relieve suffering, problems, confusion, negative attitudes, negative ways of being. So this doesn't mean, we can somehow magically transform everybody else and transform the world, but just to make a contribution, even just a small contribution, whatever we can do to increase the positive and decrease the negative in others and in the world. And realistically, to be able to do that, we need to start with ourselves, to work on our own minds, our thoughts, our attitudes, learn to be more positive, like more compassionate, wise, and so on, and learn how to manage negative thoughts and attitudes so that they don't take over our minds. So that's what we're learning about. That's the real purpose of all the Buddhist teachings, is to help us transform our minds. So it's good to try to think that you're doing this, not just for your own sake, but for the sake of others and the world. Okay, so this is our second class in this course, Discovering Buddhism Module 9 on Samsara and Nirvana. So last week we started looking at the meanings of those terms, Samsara and Nirvana. And we also looked at renunciation. This is an attitude that we try to develop, we need to develop if we really want to follow the path leading to liberation, also to enlightenment. And So there's actually two levels of this attitude of renunciation, and I thought to start by talking about those tonight. Tyler, if you could put the file up.
The file's up, Venerable.
Sorry.
I got the file up. Can you see it?
I don't see the file.
Okay.
I just see this strip with characters on it.
Oh, okay. Interesting. It's showing up on my side here.
Does anyone else see it? No.
No, not yet. Okay, let me try again.
It was up there before, just for a moment before you put the prayers up. The other file was there.
Okay, here we go. One moment. Just looked like it paused it real quick, so let me put it back on.
So anyway, I'll just start talking. It'll get up there eventually. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, good. Okay, so so renunciation, also called determination to be free. This is a state of mind, an attitude that we need to develop in order to follow the path. And it's basically renouncing, wanting to give up, wanting to get free of something. That's the general meaning of renunciation. And last week I explained renunciation as wanting to be free of samsara, wanting to get out of samsara. But Lama Tsongkhapa mentions two kinds of renunciation. The first one, he says, is renunciation of this life. And what that means is giving up being attached solely to the enjoyments of this life, the 8 worldly concerns. I assume you've heard about those before. They probably were mentioned in at least one of the other Discovering Buddhism modules, but basically the 8 worldly concerns are having attachment to 4 types of objects or experiences, like pleasure, material gain, praise, and fame or reputation. So we're attached to those 4. And then we have aversion for the opposite to those 4. So we have aversion to whatever is unpleasant. We have aversion to loss, losing things, not getting what we want. We have aversion to criticism, opposite of praise. And we have aversion to bad reputation or no reputation, like, nobody knows who you are. And so it said that, ordinary people are completely caught up in those 8 worldly concerns. And this is, generally what this means is we're just thinking about this life itself, this life, and wanting good stuff and not wanting bad stuff in just this life, and not having any thought at all of what goes beyond this life, what happens beyond this life, like, after we die. And so according to Buddhism, that's a very unhealthy way to be, unhealthy state of mind to have, because this life is going to come to an end. We're going to leave our body, we're going to leave our friends, our family, our possessions, our fame. Everything that has to do with this life is going to be left behind, and only our mind will continue and then take rebirth. And so according to Buddhism, it's very, very important to, not just be totally obsessed with this life and enjoying ourselves in this life, but we need to think about the next life and other future lives and do what we can to prepare for them. And so the way to overcome this kind of attitude of just being obsessed with this life and caught up in the 8 worldly concerns is by contemplating the preciousness of our human life, how we're really fortunate to have this life with all the opportunities to learn the Dharma and practice the Dharma. And this life isn't going to last forever. It's going to come to an end at some point. So we contemplate impermanence and death. And then we also contemplate the possibilities of next life, where we could find ourselves if we're not careful. And that involves thinking about the 3 unfortunate states of rebirth, the 3 lower realms of being born as an animal, as a hungry ghost, or in hell. And those happen as a result of doing negative actions, creating negative karma, not purifying them. And so, so it's really dangerous to live your life totally obsessed with just getting what you want in this life and avoiding trouble, but in the meantime, creating negative karma and not doing anything to purify it and not creating virtuous karma. So if we live our life that way, then we come to the end of our life, we won't be prepared for death and the next life, and we could find ourselves falling into an unfortunate situation in our next life. And so this first kind of renunciation involves, contemplating those points and then coming to the conclusion that, I better spend at least some of my time, if we can't, give up everything else and practice Dharma all the time, then at least spend some of our time practicing the Dharma and preparing ourselves for the future to have a fortunate rebirth in our next life. So that's the general meaning of that first type of renunciation of this life. It just means, turning away from being totally obsessed with just this life and thinking about what lies beyond this life and doing what will help us be prepared for that and ensure a fortunate rebirth and avoid an unfortunate one. And then the second kind of renunciation is renunciation of samsara, and that's what we were looking at last week. And that's, the main kind of renunciation we're looking at in this module of discovering Buddhism. So this comes about by understanding that wherever we're born in samsara, so even if we manage to avoid an unfortunate rebirth in our next life and we have a good rebirth, like as a human being or as a god, we're not out of trouble. There's still problems. There's still difficulties. Everywhere in samsara, there will be problems, right? And so renunciation of samsara involves realizing that, thinking about all the different kinds of suffering and problems in samsara, and then generating the wish to become free of this situation of samsara and attain liberation. So that's the main kind of renunciation we're looking at in this module. And we generate this attitude by contemplating the sufferings of samsara, the different types of unpleasant, unwanted experiences that we have in samsara. So we get a good understanding of how samsara is really miserable, like a prison, like an ocean full of dangers, like I mentioned last time, so that we don't want to stay. We don't want to remain in samsara. We want to get out. And then we look at the benefits of liberation, the opposite state, nirvana or liberation, freedom. So what that is all about. And we clearly see that, that is a much better state to attain. And so we aspire to attain that and do whatever we can to attain it. And so, as I mentioned, these two kinds of renunciation are mentioned by Lama Tsongkhapa in one of his texts, a very short text called 3 Principal Aspects of the Path. You may have encountered that. And so verse 4 of that text talks about these two kinds of renunciation. So first, it says freedom and endowments are difficult to find. That's referring to the precious human life. So it's difficult to have all the freedoms and all the endowments of a precious human life. And life has no time to spare. That means, we're not going to live forever. Our life is temporary, transitory. It's ending, it's finishing like every day. How much time we have is getting shorter and shorter. We're getting closer and closer to death. And then it says, by gaining familiarity with this, attraction to the appearances of this life is reversed. So what that means is, the more we contemplate those 2 points, the preciousness of human life and impermanence and death, then we become less obsessed by the appearances of this life, like all the good things that we can get and enjoy and do and so on. We become, less enamored of them, less enchanted by them, and become more concerned about preparing ourselves for what comes next, what comes after this life, our future life. So those first 4 lines are about the renunciation of this life. And then the last 4 lines are about renunciation of samsara. So it says, by thinking over and over again that actions and their effects are unbetraying. So that's talking about karma. So you learned about karma in one of the previous modules. So contemplating how the actions that we do bring effects, results, consequences that we will have to experience. And this is something definite. We can't run away from it. We can't purify, of course. It's possible to purify negative actions that we've done. But if we do something negative and don't purify and just leave it there, then we're definitely going to encounter misfortune, problems. So this is something definite. Then it says, and repeatedly contemplating the miseries of cyclic existence. So thinking again and again about the disadvantages, the faults, the sufferings, the problems of samsara, cyclic existence, attraction to the appearances of future lives is reversed. So what that means is, by contemplating those points, karma and the suffering nature of samsara, then we develop the wish to get out of samsara and stop taking rebirth in samsara. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. Just a little bit more detail about renunciation, that there's actually 2 levels of it. And realistically, we do have to develop the first one first. So we have to contemplate those topics of precious human life and impermanence and death, and then rebirth, that there will be another life after this one. And then look at what we can do to make sure we have a fortunate rebirth, a good rebirth, and not a negative one, a bad one. And so in the Buddhist, in the context of Buddhism, what we need to do then is taking refuge, and then living according to karma, making sure we create good karma and avoid bad karma. So that's how we make sure that, we won't go to an unfortunate rebirth in our next life. But then we also need to recognize that even if we have a good rebirth in our next life, even if we come back as a human being or a god, there's even better places than our world. But we're still in samsara. As long as we're in samsara, as long as we're still sort of trapped on this wheel of life, we're going to look at that later, the wheel of life. This wheel of dying and being reborn again and again, then we're not out of suffering. We're not free. We're still in a prison. And there will still be problems. So we need to see that and then generate the wish to get totally free altogether of samsara. And then below that quote from Lama Tsongkhapa's text, there's a little star, and it says, those wishing to follow the Mahayana path and attain full enlightenment also need to generate renunciation. Otherwise, they won't be able to develop the aspiration to lead all beings from samsara to liberation. So this is a question that comes up sometimes. If people know about the different vehicles in Buddhism, the different paths that you can follow. There's one path, sometimes it's called Hinayana, but that's not a very complementary term. So other terms would be the fundamental vehicle, or the Dalai Lama uses the term the Pali tradition, because this is the form of Buddhism that's mainly practiced in Southeast Asia, like Thailand, Sri Lanka, Burma, and so on. And there they use the term Theravada Buddhism. But anyway, that particular form of Buddhism, the goal of that practice is to attain nirvana, to get out of samsara and attain nirvana or liberation. They don't generally, people following that tradition don't normally aspire to become Buddha, to reach full enlightenment or Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So that is the goal of Mahayana. So Mahayana Buddhism, which is found in the northern Asian countries like China, Japan, Korea, Tibet, Mongolia. So in that tradition of Buddhism, our goal is not just freeing ourselves from samsara and attaining a state of peace, but wanting to help all sentient beings to become free of suffering and reach liberation, enlightenment, and so on. And to be able to do that, to be able to accomplish that goal, oneself needs to become a Buddha. Only if we are Buddhas ourselves will we be able to help all other beings get out of samsara and get to enlightenment. So in the Mahayana, those wanting to follow the Mahayana path are aiming not just for self-liberation, getting yourself out of samsara, but aiming for Buddhahood, for the benefit of all beings. So some people think that, oh, well, if you're following the Mahayana path, you don't need to generate renunciation. That is only for those following the Hinayana path or the fundamental vehicle. They need to develop renunciation because they want to attain nirvana, liberation from samsara. But we are bodhisattvas or aspiring bodhisattvas, so we want to reach Buddhahood and help all sentient beings. So we don't need to develop renunciation of samsara. So that's completely wrong. That's a mistake. That's a misunderstanding. Because, to follow the bodhisattva path, we need to very clearly recognize the faults of samsara, how horrible samsara is, because our goal is to get everybody out. So we have to realize that, every sentient being that's in samsara is in a unfortunate situation, a situation that they need to be rescued from, they need to be freed from. So we have to very clearly see the faults of samsara, the negative aspects of samsara, so that we can have that strong compassion to help all sentient beings get out of samsara, that strong determination to take on that burden ourselves and work for enlightenment so that we can bring all sentient beings out of samsara. And so it's definitely the case that those wanting to follow the Mahayana path and reach enlightenment to help all beings also have to develop renunciation. They also have to recognize how miserable it is to be in samsara. Because if you don't realize that, then you won't be able to generate the great compassion and love and bodhicitta that are necessary to follow this path, the path to Buddhahood, and help all living beings. So I just wanted to throw that in case anyone wondered about that or heard something about that. Yeah, so even on the Mahayana path, we do need to generate renunciation. Okay, so I thought tonight to look at the four, they're sometimes called the Four Noble Truths, but that's not such an accurate translation. The more accurate translation is the Four Truths of Aryas. The term Arya, that's a Sanskrit term, and it can be translated as noble one. So these are the four truths of Aryas, or noble ones. So an Arya, if you haven't heard that term before, is somebody who has attained the direct realization of emptiness. So they've learned emptiness, meditated on emptiness, gained a good understanding of emptiness, and then finally reached the direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness, which is a very important, very powerful state of mind, because it's the wisdom that directly realizes emptiness, which is the actual antidote to our afflictions, like ignorance, greed, hatred. These afflictions are the causes of remaining in samsara and experiencing suffering. And so if we really want to get out of samsara and be free of suffering, we have to get rid of those afflictions or delusions in the mind. And the only way to completely get rid of those delusions is this wisdom, directly realizing emptiness. And so an Arya is someone who has attained that wisdom. And when you do reach that state of directly realizing emptiness and becoming an Arya, that doesn't mean all the delusions go away at once, but rather they go away in stages or levels. So it's kind of like peeling an onion. You know, you have an onion with many different levels or layers. You peel away one layer and there's another one underneath. You peel away that one and there's another one, and so on. So you keep peeling and eventually there's nothing left. So it's a little bit like that with the wisdom realizing emptiness. You gain that wisdom, and you start, with that wisdom, you start removing the afflictions. Start first the more gross level of afflictions, and then the more subtle ones, and finally they're all gone. So it happens in stages rather than all at once. But having that wisdom is very, very important, very precious. So Aryas are very special beings because they have that wisdom. So these are four truths of Aryas, meaning these are four things that Aryas understand to be true. They know to be true. So the first one is the truth of suffering. And we did start looking at that last week. And how suffering, or dukkha, the Sanskrit term dukkha, this refers to all the different kinds of unpleasant and unsatisfactory experiences that we encounter in samsara. And last week we looked at a list of 8 types of suffering that Buddha mentioned in his very first teaching. Like birth, aging, sickness, death, and so on. So that's one way of looking at suffering, and those are particularly, as human beings, we are subject to those 8 types of suffering. And then there's this other list of sufferings called, in terms of three types of suffering. And it is said that these 3 types of suffering include all others. all other types of suffering, problems, difficulties, bad experiences can be included in these three. And so the first of the three is called the suffering of suffering, and that simply refers to obvious suffering. So any kind of experience, whether it's physical or mental, emotional, that we recognize as unpleasant, and we don't like it, we don't want it, we want it to stop. That is in the first type of suffering. And so you don't have to have, you don't have to be knowledgeable about the Dharma to recognize this one. Everybody recognizes this one, yeah. So it includes headaches and any kind of pain in the body, any kind of sickness that makes us feel lousy, as well as meeting with unpleasant experiences like people or other beings that don't like us and try to harm us and so on. Losing things that we don't want to lose, we want to keep, but we lose them, or they're stolen from us, or they break, fall apart, or whatever. Okay, so there's a huge variety of different kinds of sufferings that would fall into this first category. But like I say, everybody recognizes these. Animals, animals, birds, insects, yeah. When they encounter pain or hunger or cold or thirst, they don't like those experiences. They want to get away from them. They want to be free of them. So that's the first type of suffering, and that's easy to understand, easy to recognize. And the second is called the suffering of change. And this is more difficult. In fact, most people, even very intelligent people, have a hard time recognizing this one, because it refers to pleasant experiences that we normally consider pleasant, enjoyable, and we usually get very attached to them. We run after them, try to get as many as we can, and so on. But they're considered another kind of suffering, although maybe the word suffering doesn't work so well here. Maybe unsatisfactoriness would be better, or dukkha, because normally these experiences feel good. It's a pleasant experience, but because it doesn't last, it lasts only a short time and then it ends, it leaves us, kind of dumps us, then it's considered another kind of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness. And so examples of this: eating. Yeah, most people like eating, and yeah, it is pleasant to have your stomach filled when you're hungry, and the taste of the food can be very enjoyable as well. So it is a pleasant experience, but how long does it last? Yeah, how long does that pleasure last? So while we're eating, we have that pleasant experience, but then when we have to stop at a certain time, otherwise it turns into suffering rather than pleasure. And then, once we stop eating, then that pleasure is not there anymore. And also within a period of time, a couple of hours, we're hungry again. So eating doesn't totally satisfy us, doesn't totally remove the suffering of hunger, because it's just temporary, just a temporary relief of that suffering, but then it comes back again. So we have to eat again. Yeah, so this is something we need to think about and investigate our experience to see, to understand what the Buddha was talking about. Another example they often give is, let's say you're feeling kind of cold, or maybe you're in a place that's in the shade and you feel sort of cold and you got goosebumps on your arm, and then you go to a place that's warm. Either you go out in the sun or you go inside where there's a heater on, And initially, that feels like pleasure because it's warm. It takes away the suffering of cold that you had just before. But then if you stay in that situation, like if you keep sitting out in the sun, and after a while, then it most probably turns into this, something unpleasant. You get too warm, too hot, and then you have to move out of the sun into the shade again. And then again, you're in the shade. At first, it feels comfortable, pleasant, cool. But then if you stay there longer, it starts to get cold. So it's like if we watch our experiences all day long, we're constantly trying to get away from some unpleasant experience, like hunger or thirst or heat or cold or boredom, restlessness. So we're trying to get away from that unpleasant experience and trying to have some pleasant experience. And if we do find some pleasant experience, then it may satisfy us for a period of time, but sooner or later it fades, it disappears, or we become bored with it, we become dissatisfied with it, and then we want something else. Yeah. So this is the point. Pleasure, what we normally consider to be pleasant, attractive, enjoyable experience, it's not really pleasure, but it's considered another kind of unsatisfactoriness because it doesn't last, it changes, disappears, and then we're left where we were before, feeling unpleasant, feeling dissatisfied. So it doesn't completely satisfy us and doesn't remove our suffering, doesn't really remove our suffering and problems. It's just like it's a bit like eating cotton candy when you're hungry. Right? So if you're really hungry and you have some cotton candy, maybe there's a little bit of pleasure because it's sweet and maybe it fills you up for a very short period of time, but it doesn't really fill you up. Very quickly you'll be hungry again. And yeah. So that's the second type of suffering. And the third type of suffering is also difficult to understand. It's called all-pervasive suffering. And this refers to just our situation of being in samsara, having a body and mind that are bound by karma and delusions. Yeah, they sometimes use the word bondage. It's like we're tied up, we're bound, we're imprisoned by karma and delusions. We're not free of karma and delusions. We have those in our mind. We carry them from past lives. We have karma we created in past lives. We have delusions we were familiar with in past lives. So right from the beginning of our life, as soon as we're born, we have karma and delusions. And we, create more and more all the time. So we're never completely free of those. And they bring problems, suffering. It's because of our karma, because of our delusions that we run into all the other kinds of problems like sickness and dissatisfaction and boredom and having to deal with difficult people and difficult situations. So all the different kinds of problems that we encounter in samsara come from our karma and delusions. And those are in our mind. Those are part of our mind. And so it's as though we are bound by them. We are trapped in them, imprisoned by them. So just the situation itself of not being free from karma and delusions, but being trapped by karma and delusions. That is the meaning of all-pervasive suffering. So it's subtle. It's something we need to contemplate, to think about, to understand and recognize in our experience. So so that's a really helpful way of looking at suffering, the unsatisfactoriness of samsara, is to see how we are subject to those three types of experiences. So then the second truth is the truth of the cause or origin of suffering. So where does this suffering come from? Why is it there? Why do we have it? We don't want it. We don't want problems. Why do we keep encountering them? So the Buddha discovered, when he looked into this question and himself, what he discovered was there are two main causes of suffering: karma and delusions, what I was just talking about. So karma refers to actions that we do under the influence of delusions. And then delusions themselves, these are mental states of mind. Like the most common examples are greed, or could also be called attachment or craving, this wanting and being attached to things. And hatred, and there's various degrees of that, starting from just dislike, aversion, irritation, and then anger, and then it can get really strong and turn into violence, aggressiveness, wanting to actually lash out and hurt or destroy. And then ignorance, which generally means not understanding things correctly, having incorrect understanding of things. And there's different kinds of ignorance, different levels of ignorance, but that's said to be the main delusion. So we just don't understand reality. We don't understand the truth of things. So we're confused, and it's under the influence of confusion that we have all the other delusions like greed and hatred, and then we act out those delusions and create karma, do actions. And then the karma that we create, the actions that we do under the influence of ignorance and other delusions, that becomes the cause for more experiences in samsara, further samsaric rebirth and experiences. So that's where suffering comes from. And then the third truth is the truth of cessation, ceasing. And a true cessation, we use that term, a true cessation is the elimination of a delusion like greed or hatred, or even just a part of a delusion, like one level, one layer of a delusion, such that it will never arise again in one's mind. So as I mentioned earlier, when we have the wisdom directly realizing emptiness, that has the ability to remove the delusions, but not all at once, but more in layers, and bit by bit, peeling away the delusions. So once you have that wisdom realizing emptiness, and you're able to remove even just a portion of a delusion, such that it will never arise again. It's like that delusion is gone forever from your mind. It will never come back. You will never experience that again. So that's possible. And that's what is called a true cessation. So it's, when a delusion or a part of a delusion has been removed and will never come back, that's the meaning of cessation. And then it says the ultimate true cessation is when all delusions have been completely eliminated. This is liberation, nirvana. Okay, so when a person has been able to remove all the delusions, so they're gone forever and they will never return, that is the point of attaining liberation, nirvana. And that's the final state, meaning once you reach that state, you never fall back. You never return to samsara. Once you're liberated, it is final. And a person who has attained that is known as an arhat. You may have heard that term, arhat. It's a Sanskrit term. So that's a very special person, a being. And then the fourth truth is the truth of the path. And the term path really refers to a mind, a mental state. Okay, so it's not like a physical something that we walk on, we move on, we travel on, but it's a mental state. And there are numerous paths, numerous of these mental states or realization. It's actually a realization that we come to through learning and meditating on the Dharma. And the main of these true paths is the wisdom that directly realizes emptiness, the true nature of all things. So that's what I mentioned before, that wisdom directly realizing emptiness, that is the main path, because it is a path that leads to the end of suffering. It's a path that takes us to a place where we're free of suffering and free of the causes of suffering. So that's why it's called a path. So that's the main path to be attained. So the Four Noble Truths, this is just a very brief introduction, but there's a lot of material, a lot of details that you can learn about. There's books, whole books, just about the Four Noble Truths. I can mention some if you're interested. In fact, there's one by Lama Zopa Rinpoche that was published just a few years ago called The Four Noble Truths. There's also one by Geshe Tashi, Tsering, part of a course that he developed called, what's it called? Foundation of Buddhist Thought. So there's a book published by Wisdom on the Four Noble Truths. There's also one by His Holiness on the Four Noble Truths. So there's whole books about the Four Noble Truths that give you much more information than here. They're very profound and very important. So I thought next to look at the Wheel of Life. So there's a picture here of the Wheel of Life, and this you may have seen if you have visited Tibetan temples or monasteries. They usually have this painting. Often it's on the wall outside the main entrance. And in Tibet, my understanding is there were a lot of people who were illiterate. They didn't know how to read. And so this was like a good way to teach people some of the basic, most important aspects of Buddhism. So you can just keep that there on the screen, and then I'll talk about the different elements. This file will be sent to you later, so you have it. So there's different sections of the wheel. And if you think of it like a bicycle wheel, okay, then the spokes, where the spokes of the bicycle wheel are, that shows the 6 realms of samsara. These are 6 different places where rebirth can occur, where we can be born. And at the very top, like where 12 o'clock is, that depicts the God realm. So the gods are the highest. They have the greatest amount of pleasure and the least amount of suffering. And there's different kinds of God realms. So there's higher ones and lower ones. But generally, that's considered the best place to be born in samsara in terms of pleasure and little suffering. That's up at the top. And then, let's see. Let me look at my picture. It's a little hard to see here. I think going clockwise, the one just below that is the human realm. That would be at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock. Yeah, so going clockwise from the top is the human realm. So there it shows people, human beings, and also Buddha's teaching. So that's where the Buddha came to teach. And so that's where we are, the human realm. And that's considered a fortunate situation, relatively. But again, we do have suffering. We do have problems here. We get sick and old and die and lose what we don't want to lose, and so on. And then continuing clockwise, the next section shows the hungry ghosts. You can see beings with skinny, emaciated arms and legs and big bellies. So they have mainly their suffering is hunger and thirst. They're hungry and thirsty, but they're not able to find food and drink. And so they live a long life, experiencing intense hunger and thirst and being completely obsessed with that. So it's quite a miserable situation. And it mainly comes about through karma like stealing, or being miserly, being very attached to your things, not wanting to share them with others, not practicing giving, generosity, and so on. Then right at the bottom is hell. There's lots of different hell realms. Some are hot, like fiery, others are cold, freezing ice. So that's the worst place to be in samsara. Lots of suffering, worst kind of suffering possible, and lasting a long time. And that usually comes about through creating particularly heavy negative actions, like motivated by hatred, anger, like killing, harming others through hatred. So yeah, unfortunately, many beings create that kind of karma and end up in such situations. Then continuing in a clockwise direction, the next over on the left side is the animal realm. So there's different kinds of animals like horses and tigers and elephants and so on. So we know the animal realm because we share our world with them. And that's considered an unfortunate situation as well, because they have a lot of suffering. And the worst thing about the animal realm is the lack of mental ability to understand the Dharma. So even if you're an animal, like you may be the pet of a llama, for example, a llama's cat or dog, and you're given a lot of love and they recite mantras for you, and yeah, so you have a pretty good life, but you don't have the ability to understand the teachings and practice them. So that's the worst thing about being born as an animal. And that's also the result of negative karma, but lighter forms of negative actions. And then the last one up in the upper left is the Asura realm. Sometimes they're called jealous gods. So those are kind of celestial beings, but they suffer from jealousy. They're jealous of the gods at the top, and always, not always, but often waging war on them, trying to steal what they have. The gods have nicer things, and so the jealous gods, the asuras, are jealous and they want to steal away what the gods have, so they wage war. But because their karma isn't so good, they usually lose these battles and get injured and killed and so on. So it's not really such a great place to be born. And there's not a lot of information about like what is the cause for rebirth in the Asura realm. But generally, what we are advised to do is to aim for birth as a human being, because in the human realm, we have the greatest chance to learn the Dharma and the opportunities to practice the Dharma. So that's considered the best of all the realms for Dharma practice. So those are the 6 different realms of samsara, and they say we have been in all of them. We have been born in all of those realms in our past life. And then right in the middle, like the hub of the wheel, there are 3 animals: a snake, a pig, and a bird. Sometimes they say it's a rooster or a pigeon, but anyway, it's some kind of bird. those represent the three main afflictions of greed, hatred, and ignorance. So the bird represents greed or attachment, the snake represents anger or hatred, and the pig represents ignorance about the true nature of things. So those lie at the very heart of our existence in samsara. And then around that, there are two semicircles. On the right, it's like has a dark background, and that depicts karma, bad karma, negative karma. So it kind of shows these demons that are dragging people in a downward direction. So that means those who have created negative karma, bad karma, they will be, I mean, not literally taken to the lower realms, but it's their karma, their bad karma, that causes them to take birth in the lower realms. And then on the left side, it's like it has a white background, and it shows people in clouds and going upwards. So that represents good karma, virtue. So those who create virtue or good karma, they will ascend to the upper realms, the higher realms. Okay. And then the outer rim, like the wheel of the bicycle, if this was a bicycle wheel, that has 12 sections, and those depict the 12 links of dependent arising. We'll get to that later in the course. That's kind of a complicated topic, but this was the Buddha's explanation of what is the actual process of taking rebirth in samsara. How do we actually create the karma, and then how does that karma cause us to be reborn in samsara and keep spinning, cycling in samsara? So those are called the 12 links of dependent arising. And then this red being, this fierce looking red being holding the wheel represents death. He's called Yama. I don't think it's a real being, but it's just a personification of death. So he represents impermanence and death. So it's because of, death is one of the main factors keeping us in samsara, because, we're born in this life. We have a pretty good life now, but it's not going to last. It's going to come to an end. We're going to die, and then we're kind of like a ball on a roulette wheel. Yeah, we don't know where we're going to land next. So this is, one of the problems in samsara. We die again and again and have to take birth again and again, and nothing lasts. No, even the gods, the highest realm, they have very long and pleasant lives, but they too have to die. And then they're again on the wheel, and they may be born in one of the unfortunate realms, which was terrible for them. So then on the upper right corner outside of the wheel is the Buddha in the clouds standing, and he's pointing to the other side of the drawing, and that is a picture of Amitabha, Amitabha's Pure Land, called Sukhavati. So there are Pure Lands, places that a Buddha with their vast merit, they create these Pure Lands, places where people can take birth, continue to learn the Dharma and practice the Dharma, and complete their practice and reach enlightenment. So the Buddha is pointing to that and saying, go there, don't stay in samsara, get out of samsara, go to the Pure Land, and there you can practice in peace and get free yourself. In some drawings or paintings, they don't have a Pure Land. Instead, they have a moon. Buddha's pointing to the moon, and the moon represents nirvana, pointing to nirvana. saying, go there, get out of samsara. And there's an inscription a little on the left side, just below where Amitabha's Pure Land is. There's an inscription, but it's in Tibetan. But I have a translation of it. And oh, you can scroll down. Tyler, you can scroll down. There's further down, there's the translation. Next page, translation. Okay, there it is. So this is an inscription, and it reads, undertaking this and leaving that, enter into the teaching of the Buddha. Like an elephant in a thatch house, destroy the forces of the Lord of Death. Those who, with thorough conscientiousness, practice this disciplinary doctrine will forsake the wheel of birth, bringing suffering to an end. So, yeah, this drawing of the Wheel of Life with this inscription is quite ancient, and it's said to originate in India. One of the kings had this painting made and sent it to a friend, another king, with that inscription on it. And it said that the king who received the painting of the Wheel of Life, as soon as looking at it and reading that inscription, they attained nirvana. They got the realization they needed to get out of samsara and attain nirvana. So yeah, it's kind of a good teaching tool. Okay, so you can go back. No, Tyler, you can keep going. I just have one more topic I was going to talk about. This is the 6 types of suffering in samsara. Yeah. So this is another list of sufferings, and I'll just maybe briefly mention them. You can read more about them later, and I did want to leave some time for questions. So this is another way of meditating on samsara, these 6 types of suffering. The first is uncertainty. So that's definitely the case right now in our country, right? In the world, with the present administration and what they're doing. There's a lot of uncertainty about what is going to happen with all the tariffs and the trade wars and the economy, and a lot of people also are experiencing uncertainty about their job, if they're going to have their job, and of course some people whose status is uncertain. They don't have a passport, they're not certain they will be able to remain in this country, they might be deported. So yeah, this is a very big problem right now for a lot of people. But even in good times, even when the present problems aren't happening, there's always uncertainty. Uncertainty is just a characteristic of samsara. Because, for example, we're definitely, our life will come to an end at some point, and we just don't know when that's going to be. Because there's so many different ways that death can happen. You don't have to be old, you don't have to be sick to die. Other things can happen. So there's always uncertainty. And also just, we make plans, we have wishes that we want to fulfill, and plans that we make, and things we want to do, things we want to happen. But we can never be 100% certain that things will happen the way we wish, the way we plan. So even on a daily basis, even with small things, there's uncertainty. Uncertainty of, what you plan to do, what you set out to do will actually happen. And then the second is dissatisfaction. So this is a common ongoing problem in samsara. The Buddha once said that following desire is like drinking salt water. Our thirst isn't quenched, but increases. So we're always trying to get pleasure from different objects, food and drink, and listening to sounds, beautiful music, looking at things. So, our mind is often seeking pleasure from different objects. And some of these objects do give us pleasure, but how long does that pleasure last? Maybe a few minutes or hours or days, months, years. But sooner or later, dissatisfaction sets in. We become dissatisfied with what we have and want something more, something better. Manufacturers know this very well. So they're always making new and improved iPhones and models of cars and computers and so on, because they know, if they can offer a new and improved version, a better version, people will want it, and then they'll make more money. So as long as we're in samsara, we never experience real, genuine, long-lasting happiness and satisfaction. And then number 3 is dying again and again. So we looked at that already, how, as long as we're in samsara, whatever life we take, it doesn't last forever. It's always temporary, because we eventually die, and then once again, we're on the wheel, not sure where we're going to end up, where we're going to be born. So having to go through that experience of dying and leaving behind our family, friends, loved ones, possessions, home, body, having to leave those things behind again and again and again. It's very painful, very unpleasant. And then that's followed by taking birth again and again. So number 4. So some people might think, oh, that's cool. You get to start all over again, brand new body. But, it's not always that great having a new body. Like babies, they cry a lot. Getting used to this body and learning how to digest food and having to learn how to walk and talk and go to school and get a job, having to go through that whole process again and again and again. Is that really so wonderful, so fantastic? And in some cases, right from the beginning of life, right from birth, there can be terrible problems, sickness, pain, or being born in a family that doesn't really take care of you. Maybe there's abuse, there's drug addiction, and so on. So being born isn't necessarily such a great thing. And then number 5, falling from high position. So, we like to be in a high position in terms of wealth, power, fame, and so on. And there may be times in our life when we do enjoy being in such a high position, but that's also not permanent. It's also impermanent, like the number 1 football player or the most popular singer or actor or actress. They won't stay in that position forever. Somebody else will come along who's better, more popular, and they get old and can't do what they're doing anymore. So that's like falling. And so they say, as we go through samsara, there's times when we're in a high position, but inevitably we fall from that. We can't remain in such a position forever. So that's very painful, to fall from a high position. And number 6 is being alone. So even though during our life we have family and friends that we spend time with, but we come into this world alone. We're in the womb alone, right? We're alone for 9.5 months or 10 months or whatever it is in the womb. And then we come out and, there's our family. But then when we die, again, we're alone. We leave behind all our family and our friends and go alone to the next life. Can't take anyone with us. So even though there are times we are with others, close to others, enjoying others, but that isn't something that can last forever. We always have to separate from our loved ones, and then we're again alone. And also, we could think about this in terms of our experiences, when we have, a really painful experience like grief or depression, we may feel very alone, like nobody understands how we feel. Nobody really knows how we feel. So we can feel very alone in that. And likewise, when we have really wonderful experiences, it may be difficult to describe that to others and get them to understand. So we would love to share that experience with everybody else, but maybe they don't understand. Maybe they think we're nuts. So at the beginning of our life, at the end of our life, and often during our life, there's this situation of being alone. Okay, so that's just a brief look at those 6. And like I say, you can read more about those in some of the readings. So are there questions? I do see one in the chat. What is the relation between karma and delusion? Does one cause the other to occur? So karma really means action. The word karma means action. And it can be an action of our body, a physical action. It can be an action of our speaking. And it can also be an action of the mind doing something, involved in some train of thought or some plan or whatever. So karma refers to action. And then there's always a motivation, something that motivates an action. So that could be something positive, something virtuous. Like when we make an offering to our teacher or to the Buddha out of devotion. So that's a virtuous motivation for an action. But a lot of actions are done out of delusion, like anger, okay? So if we get angry and then we speak harsh words, then that's a negative action, negative karma motivated by a delusion. So delusion can be the motivating factor for karma, for action. That's the relation between them. So I see Stan Poplin has a hand up.
Hello, thank you. This has only been touched on loosely in tonight's discussion, but I heard recently the notion that bodhisattvas can die. And of course, I guess they're subject to impermanence, but it made me understand in myself that I don't have a great understanding of the nature of a bodhisattva. And I assume, like in the wheel that you showed, the bodhisattvas reside in all of those realms, perhaps because they're trying to help with their compassion. But they must be a supernatural kind of entity that is still subject to impermanence, but they're not arhats because they're not coming back. And I know that the bodhisattva vow is to not reach complete enlightenment until they've helped all other sentient beings get there. So can you talk a little bit about the nature of a bodhisattva?
Well, there's bodhisattvas can be at different levels. So first of all, to be a bodhisattva, you have to have bodhicitta. So that means you've been meditating on compassion and love and this wish to benefit others. And so when the wish to become a Buddha, to be able to help all other living beings, when that wish becomes natural and spontaneous, you don't have to think your way into it. It just arises naturally, spontaneously. So when you get to that point, that's when you become a bodhisattva. That's like the first point of being a bodhisattva, when you have natural, spontaneous, uncontrived bodhicitta. And then from that point on, a bodhisattva needs to engage in different practices like the 6 perfections, giving, ethics, and so forth. They need to develop concentration, they need to develop wisdom. So they engage in mainly those 6 perfections, and they accumulate a lot of merit. And they go through different stages. There's it's kind of complicated, but 10, well, they're called bhumis or grounds, 10 grounds of bodhisattvas. And as they progress through these stages or these grounds, their ability to do things increases. They become, they gain more and more powers. And one important point on the bodhisattva path is when they become an Arya. I mentioned earlier the term Arya. An Arya is someone who has a direct realization of emptiness. And so when that happens for a bodhisattva has a direct realization of emptiness. That's the point at which they become an Arya bodhisattva. And it's said that from that time on, they're not out of samsara. They're not yet free of samsara, but they have control over where they're born. So they can choose where they take birth. And they do take birth out of compassion to help sentient beings. So they want to keep coming back into the world and help sentient beings. And they can do that by choice rather than just thrown by their karma. And so, bodhisattvas from that, so while they're on the path, they're not yet enlightened, they do still take birth in samsara, and they, have to die. They come to the end of their life. It's only when you become a Buddha, like the end of the bodhisattva path is when you become a Buddha. So at that point, you don't have to die anymore. But bodhisattvas are still subject to dying.
And therefore, they're showing up as actual human beings or other life forms, perhaps in our existence, or otherwise.
Yeah, they can go to any of the realms. They could be, in our world, a human world. They could also go to the animal world and the God realms, and wherever they feel they can help sentient beings. So they can take birth in any of the different realms.
Thank you very much.
Ladan, I don't know if I'm saying your name right.
Yes, thank you, Ladan. Yes. Actually, my question was in the chat. Thank you for explaining that to me. I didn't get it very well as I come back to you. Like karma and delusion, like delusion is a negative sense, right? Like you take,
Negative
you don't,
mind. Yeah.
you don't take the reality as it is, right?
Well, that's one kind of delusion, but there's lots of different delusions. Anger and greed and jealousy, arrogance. There's many different delusions. There isn't just one or two.
Yeah. So, like sometimes your karma make you back to this world, to the samsara, and but what about the positive karma that bring you like to become a bodhisattva, or it's the karma too, right?
I didn't get the last thing you said. What the good
Like the karma can be, delusion is negative, but the karma can be positive or negative.
right. So yeah, so what we mainly want to avoid is negative karma, like killing, stealing, and so on. But even when we create good karma, you know, like being generous, being ethical, being kind, and so on, meditating. So even when we're creating good karma, as long as there's still ignorance about the true nature of things, as you know, our mind is still under the influence of ignorance, and we're not seeing things correctly, then even the good karma, the virtuous karma we create, it still becomes the cause for being in samsara. But in a fortunate situation, like as a human being or as a god, but we're still in samsara. And so this is a little hard to understand, but to really be free of samsara, the main thing we want to be free of is ignorance. Ignorance about the true nature of things. Because as long as that's there in our mind, even when we're good, we do good things, we create virtue, we're still circling in samsara. It's only when we overcome ignorance that we can get out.
Otherwise, it would be too simple. I was thinking about that because sometimes you give something and you say to yourself that that was a good action I did, or you become like proud or something.
Yeah. So next week we'll start looking more at the causes of suffering and the delusions. So yeah, these are really good questions, but they will be, we can't
Thank you.
tonight. We'll yeah, there's some readings for you to do, mainly about the causes of suffering, starting to look at the delusions. And also if you have time, you can reflect on the 3 types of suffering to get more familiar with those. And there's the readings and a question, questions for you to think about. So I hope you have time to do all of those. And yeah, we'll have to end here for tonight. But again, if any questions do come up during the week, you can send them in to Tyler. Yeah, and then he'll forward them to me, and I can answer them next week. So let's finish by dedicating the merit, the positive energy of our class, coming together, looking at these important topics. So we've definitely created merit, good energy, good karma, virtue. This is the cause of happiness, the cause of spiritual growth, getting closer to enlightenment. So the best thing we can do with this merit is sharing it with others, all other beings. I don't know if you're able to get the prayers back on. There's some dedication prayers on the prayer sheet. Yeah, that one. There we go. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel, source of every benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Patient in bearing the hardships of spreading the teachings of the Muni in general and the teachings of the victorious Jamgon in hundreds of directions, Lord of Dharma, holding the 3 vows and wearing saffron robes, please quickly return as the glory of the peerless teachings. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tyler, for organizing the class, facilitating.
You're welcome. My pleasure, Venerable. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful
Thank you,
teaching.
everyone.
Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you so much.
See you next week.
Thank you.